what is the face of women after COVID? Is it still the same? How are we seeing it? And I think some of the things that Danny reflected on, I'll reflect on as well. I think what Scott was talking about in terms of the face of woman in the different waves did demonstrate the gravity of the impact of not only COVID, but the system, the system that will, the global system, the system that we're in, particularly even here in South Africa, that demonstrates that there's still huge disparities when it comes to resource allocation, resource distribution, power distribution, power sharing, and all of those things that we, aim for as citizens. Is the face of woman still, looking like that, even after COVID? Does the woman still have power or not? I think you asked that question. And how does she build it? What should companies be doing, and so on? So what I'm seeing and what I'm reading from where I'm coming from is that the state of woman in the workplace specifically is still hanging in the balance, whether you have hybrid working, flexible working, and so on and so forth. And I'll tell you why. I've just joined an organization now, and I'm working on racial equality, diversity, and inclusion, where, we're looking at how do we build organizations that are inclusive? How do we build diverse teams? How do we build organizations that fosters an anti-racist culture, so that people, I think using the Umaniko phrase, people come to work and bring their authentic self there. And what I'm seeing more and more is that women have now taken on a bigger role. I think what Zani was talking about in terms of empathy, because of the impact of COVID, a lot of organizations have realized that they need to start building into their organizations or their audio or the HR, a lot of well-being related initiatives. And I think there's more spotlight now on well-being in organizations across the board, whether corporate or whatever. DEI has become the most sexy, phrase that you can ever have. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter, put a spotlight on it, but COVID as well has made it more alive now that you're having these well-being initiatives being implemented. So you have organizations now, and what this has done, and I think it's similar to what some of the colleagues were talking about, what this has done is that it has brought the woman to the fore. And we can debate whether it's a good thing or not. So we're having more women heading these well-being committees. Even as I've joined this human rights organization, we've set up well-being committees, we've set up DEI committees, and the majority of people in there are women who are taking center stage. So what this has done is that it has brought women to the fore to begin to shape, the workplace that they're looking for, to shape it. And because a lot of organizations now, because of the George Floyd thing, have no choice. They can't afford not to jump on the bandwagon, whether it's for reputational risk or for survival, whatever it is. The fact is that they have to even mimic some DEI of some sort so that they create that inclusive environment. So in a way, in my view, the more women are coming to center stage and, running these well-being and DEI-related initiatives in organizations, they're influencing how policies should be done. Just in the organization where I am now, we're talking about hybrid working. And like Zani said, in fact, they have given us a choice. You can actually work from anywhere. You can choose. There's just even a survey we had to fill in. You can choose to work from anywhere. Where obviously you have legal status to work. You can choose to work certain hours, which again, I think is what we've been talking about. So I think, Scott, that is a win in my view. The flip side of it, colleagues, is that what I'm seeing is that regardless, despite women having the center stage at well-being and crafting all these flexi working arrangements, it has created a kind of a ceiling for women. So because people know we are empathetic, so we should be in a well-being committee, and we can be in those other strategic positions where influence is needed, and where power is, where decisions are actually made, So it's almost like we have got a bit of power, but at a default position, if you see what I mean. So because of the empathy, the nature of the women and all of that, the well-being committees and things like that, all women are there and the men are still holding the power. The men are still, driving the processes. The men are still deciding how much money should go to that well-being committee, in fact. So if you look at it, that's why I'm saying that the face of the woman in the workplace is still hanging in the balance when it comes to power. The second piece is that COVID is still with us. There are people who have said COVID is long gone and we need to move on with life. We're in level 1 for South Africa, for example, so we need to move and lead our lives. Let me tell you, there's a joke that my husband shared with me the other day. It's a clip that is talking about people who've been vaccinated are waiting for those who are not vaccinated to die, and those who are vaccinated are waiting for those people who have not been vaccinated to die. Isn't that an interesting one? So there's all these perspectives about COVID. But the point I want to make is that there's what they're calling now long COVID. In fact, the effects of long COVID. You could test negative for COVID, but you still have the symptoms and the effects of COVID. I've lost family members. I think, Tembela, you saw maybe on Facebook, where within a space of a week had lost close families and so on. And many of us here obviously have experienced this. So what long COVID has done is that because you are not performing at the level that you're performing before, you can't do the same work you were doing. So it requires that in some cases, some women actually do not even qualify to work again. And those that can still work, they still have the burden of care on them. They have long COVID, but they still, whether you're in a flexi working environment or not, you still have to, work through those burden of care. And others still have to take care of those people, family members who have long COVID. And this has changed the dynamics of how women can actually show up even in the workplace, because there's all these, what we're calling the intersectionality of vulnerabilities that woman is facing because of the long COVID. So the burden of care still is there, whether you're working flexi or not, and so on. And that has demobilized some people and some families. I have quite a number of my own families myself who are still suffering from long COVID. We have to send money for medication. We have to make sure that they, for those that, there's some that can't even taste food anymore, even smell, So we're trying all kinds of things. And you can imagine the burden that this is creating on families, let alone on women who are predominantly caregivers. So what am I saying? What I'm basically saying is that the face of a woman after COVID is still that she still has to juggle many things. It's called, that multitasking thing is still there. We still have to bust that myth. It's still there because we still have to play these multiple roles. When it comes to the workplace, again, remember, more and more companies are going hybrid working, flexi working arrangements, like we said. But has discrimination reduced? Gender-based violence in the workplace reduced? That's the question we're asking. If you look at the stats, you look at the reports, whether you're working virtually, you still are finding that, the discrimination is still there. And the discrimination that has come up now is what they're calling covert, not COVID, covert, C-O-V-E-R-T. Overt, open, covert is the closed type of discrimination. And these covert type of discrimination are now embedded within the policies, the structures, the systems, and the practices, particularly HR practices. So you have, for example, we did speak about, I think in level 1, or is it wave 1, where we had people who have been taught to work from home, but they do not have the tools of the trade. The company is not ready, doesn't have that support that is required. That is still happening in most cases. So there's some companies that have still not evolved even to give tools of trade to employees that may have a form of disability, for example. So you have Zoom calls, all these teams and so on, and yet you have people in the organization that still have impairment to, hearing, and the companies have not adjusted, those policies or practices. There's still, in terms of hiring processes, now that it's virtual, if a person is not speaking properly or their internet connection is not properly, they're excluded, so it's very covert. You can't see it, but then you say, oh, well, the internet connection, and in fact, even the way he was speaking, we can't even hear him. Sometimes when you're face to face, the physical and the body language can help you to actually understand this person is nervous, or that, they understand what they're saying. But now with technology, we're finding that there's that exclusion that is emerging that we need to look at, even as companies. And so you find that a lot of women, some of them, and I've always been saying this many times, that, and I'll come to it when I talk about how do women build power in the workplace. A lot of us women, predominantly, we've been excluded to having to pursue hardcore roles like your STEMs. It's now that, the government of South Africa and others in Africa are pushing that we have more girls and women take on those kind of occupations. And what that has done is that, things like science, things like technology, is not our forte, although we're having a few coming up and stepping up, but broadly, if you see even in communities, just to have a cell phone for our mothers to communicate, because now everybody's on Zoom, and it's just such a burden. And so what is happening is that technology, in a way, although people are saying that COVID and the move to internet and virtual working has equalized, so we have more participants, we have more reach, I still think that, women who are working, say, in the restaurants, women who are working informally and may not have the smartphones that can catch the bandwidth for those Zoom calls are excluded. And so they will have no power, the power to voice out, or the power to participate. You send all these surveys consulting people about policy and so on to communities where predominantly are women, but internet penetration is very low. They're excluded, so they don't have the power to voice out. They don't have that power that they can actually exercise, as it were, because they can't gather anymore in any case. And technology is becoming, it's something we need to really carefully look at in terms of how do we use technology to increase power for women to participate and voice out, whether in the workplace or even in the communities where they are. So how can women build power in the workplace? I think I did a whole series on that. I'll repeat some of the things that I'd mentioned earlier, but more increasingly what I've noticed is that, and coming from the issue of technology that I've just mentioned, is that I think as women, we need to then begin, even in the workplace, begin to identify what we're good at. Forget school, you tell me, Barbara, you can be good at this and that and that, and then but then you're still working in a system that's patriarchal and very discriminating. Yes, we understand all of that. But something can still set you apart as a woman. If you become professional before you become a woman. So they should see you as a professional before they see you as a woman. And what do I mean by that? So if you're good at presentation, if you're good at graphics, if you're good at marketing, if you're good at designs, master the skill, master the skill, because it's the skill that will set you apart. We understand there are all these discriminatory laws and things like that in the workplace. But when a woman is seen, not because we're giving you this role as CEO because you're a woman, no, they're giving me this role because, I'm a trained engineer, I've been set apart. It gives you technical power. I think I did mention that some time ago. They'll look for you, even with load shedding, they'll say, let's get the transformer back. Where is Tembela, who knows how to fix transformers? They'll look for you. So technical power is very key for us women to be set apart and have power in the workplace. They may not like you, but you still be called upon somehow, and you can influence. Again, I think the second one is, how do we find allies? We spoke about that many times. How do we find allies, whether in men in the workplace or even the women that are there around the cause? As I mentioned earlier, now we have mushrooming well-being and DEI initiatives in the workplace. That's a point of mobilization for women, or create a critical mass. So instead of just discussing well-being, we discuss, pay parity, representation, and all these other issues. So we use that as a linchpin for us to begin to exercise other issues and other strategic needs that women need. And we can then begin to demand, what type of hybrid working we want, what type of workplace we're looking for. And when it comes to the companies, what are some of the things that they can do? Or, like I said, for example, in this human rights organization that I'm working in now, we've started looking at these well-being committees and also taking these recommendations quite seriously. We've demanded now that even the Secretary General is part of the well-being committee, so that the decisions are not going through many hula hoops. So again, having strategic people in those committees that can make decisions becomes an important point for shaping decisions. I've been thinking about this phrase quite a lot: fix the system and not the women. Let's fix the system and not the women, because there's this notion that we need to have women representation, we need to remove gender-based violence for women, and yet we're leaving out the bigger system that is driving all of these things. It's the biases, the stereotypes, the patriarchal beliefs and cultural practices that the system has embedded in itself, that we need to fix. So again, it's a covert discrimination that has created this discrepancy, and yet the focus is on the woman and not the system. So let's kind of really have a shift and say, let's not fix the woman. It's like you have to fix the woman to be represented, a woman to have this, have that, and so on. Let's fix the system that is creating these disparities. And begin to identify those. So organizations, they start looking internally and saying, how is the system creating these imbalances? Obviously, companies should promote hybrid working that is flexible enough and is not lip service and works for women. We also look at getting promotions that are equitable, so that, for example, in the human rights organization I'm working in now, we're promoting a lot of anti-bias tools in our recruitment. So we've got software, we've got a few things that where even when you send an advert out, the software screens for racial undertones, it screens for masculinity, phrases, gender biases, and all of those things, so that, we can begin to get women front and center, when it comes to promotions or recruitments. The last one, which I've found quite important, and only because there's a narrative that women leaders do not support each other. And when they ascend to power, they become men and not even women, because they want to be seen strong, and powerful and so on. This is what I'm calling women senior level sponsorship of fellow women. So when you become a woman, and Maya Angelou has said that I come, as one, but I represent 10,000 others. So when you're a leader, as a woman leader in there, be the sponsor of all the other 10,000 women behind. That's how we build a critical mass. That's how we build power. It's not a boom. It's not an abracadabra kind of thing. We have to be intentional as women leaders to start pulling these other women. I think it was our colleague from Osisa last time who mentioned to us that she's actually created even a feminist program within the organization where women are being pulled in, being trained on feminist leadership and all of that. Our friend, what's her name in Osisa again? Her name keeps Alice, How do we get leaders at that level to start pulling other women and not pull each other down? Because And I've said this, colleagues, we should not ever use this phrase that women pull each other down. It is a ploy by the system to show that we're not organized, that we can't work together. They'll tell you, oh, look, Collie has been given a CEO of this and this company, and look, she can't even promote fellow women. We start promoting that narrative. We should never even use those phrases. And I'm only saying this because we're in this platform. I never use it that women pull each other down, because the ploy, it's a system wants to continue that narrative so that women cannot support each other. So if there are women leaders here who have influence and power, pull other women, put them in, train them, have side meetings, network with them, mold them, mentor them, so that we have this cadre of women that can move mountains.